For Pacifica Radio, I'm Christina Onnested. The United Nations Security Council is expected to vote on another ceasefire resolution in Gaza, backed by Arab nations and opposed by the U.S., which is expected to veto the resolution and propose its own weaker version for a temporary ceasefire in Gaza linked to the release of all hostages and call for the lifting of restrictions on the delivery of humanitarian aid. This as the Washington Post reports the Biden administration is planning on sending some 1,000 bombs to Israel. It's day 2 of hearings at the International Court of Justice on the legality of Israel's occupation of Palestinian land. South Africa made arguments accusing Israel of apartheid against the Palestinians. Israel's occupation of land sought for a Palestinian state is illegal. Visumzi Madencel is ambassador of South Africa in the Netherlands.
The inhumane discriminatory policies and practices of the Israeli regime as an even more extreme form of the apartheid that was institutionalized against black people in my country, coincidentally from the year 1948, and which lasted until 1994.
Ben Klein has more.
The hearings are separate from South Africa's case with the ICJ, which ruled Israel must do more to prevent genocide in Gaza. This case would consider Israel's long-standing occupation of Palestinian land and alleged apartheid practices, which Palestinian officials say violate international law. The judges will hear from 52 countries over the coming days. The Palestinian territory in this case is based on the land Israel occupied following the 1967 Six-Day War and includes the West Bank and Gaza. Under international law, it is illegal for a country to permanently occupy territory taken by force. In the 57 years since the initial occupation, Israel has continued to expand settlements, with 2023 seeing unprecedented acceleration in settlement construction. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dismissed the case, saying that Israel does not recognize the legitimacy of the ICJ's opinion. I'm B. Klein.
Israel's ordered new evacuations from parts of Gaza City in the north today. This as a study led by the UN Children's Agency finds 1 in 6 children are acutely malnourished in the isolated and largely devastated northern Gaza. The report by the Global Nutrition Cluster and UNICEF says more than 90% of children under 5 in Gaza eat 2 or fewer food groups each day, known as severe food poverty. UN human rights experts are calling for a probe into claims of Israeli sexual violence against Palestinian women, including rape, extrajudicial killings of women with their children, and in at least one instance, detaining Palestinian women in a cage in the rain and cold without food. They're calling for independent, impartial, thorough, and effective investigation into those claims. Arguments were made in London's High Court today to stop Julian Assange from being extradited to the U.S., where he faces life in prison for espionage charges over releasing classified U.S. government documents on WikiLeaks that in part detailed potential U.S. war crimes in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Assange's supporters rallied outside the court hearing today. Stella Assange is his wife.
It's an attack on all journalists all over the world. It's an attack on the truth, and it's an attack on the public's right to know. Julian is a political prisoner, and his life is at risk. What happened to Navalny can happen to Julian.
Julian Assange has been fighting extradition for more than a decade and has spent the last 5 years in a high-security prison. If the judges rule against Assange's appeal, he can ask the European Court of Human Rights to block his extradition. Supporters say he could be put on a plane to the U.S. before that happens. President Biden said he's open to talks with U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson over a bill to provide military assistance to Ukraine, Israel, and other allies, which has stalled in Congress. Max Pringle reports.
President Biden spoke to reporters briefly today on the White House lawn after he returned to the White House aboard a helicopter. He chastised House Republicans for holding up what he called vitally needed assistance to Ukraine.
The way they're walking away from the threat of Russia, the way they're walking away from NATO, the way they're walking away from meeting our obligations is just shocking. I've been for a while. I've never seen anything like this.
The Senate bill is for $95 billion in funding for aid to allies and border security measures. About $60 billion of that would go to Ukraine. I'm Max Pringle.
Japanese Americans and their allies commemorated a day of remembrance throughout the U.S. The day 82 years ago, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed an executive order compelling Japanese Americans in the western states to be relocated into concentration camps during World War II. I'm Christina Onnested, reporting for Pacifica Radio.